Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this session of Spokane Public Schools Keep Learning Series for Literacy. Today's lesson is for all our first graders out there, and any child who is interested is welcome to join us. My name is Katie Jensen, and I'm a reading interventionist and literacy coach at Stevens Elementary in Spokane Schools, and I will be your teacher for this lesson. I'm so glad you are here participating with me today. If you didn't see our previous lesson, you can find it on the KSPS website. You can still tune into today's lesson if you haven't seen any of our others. Today, we will be learning about fantasy and real-life features within a text. For today's lesson, you will need a paper and a writing utensil. I'll give you a moment to gather your supplies. Let's get started. To make a garden grow, you start with seeds. You plant them in the soil. You make sure they have enough water and sunlight. Soon, the seeds will start to grow. This week, we're going to read a story about what happens when a character named Toad plants some seeds in the garden. This is a fantasy story. That means it could not happen in real life. A fantasy story has different elements than an informational text. We might hear animals who talk and act like people, and events that could really not happen. In our story, Toad didn't know much about real seeds and how they grow in a garden. Today, when we read our story, we'll look for some of the things that happen that make our story make-believe or fantasy. At the end of the story, we're going to fill in a story map to help us remember all of the different parts of our story. Let's get started reading The Garden. The Garden, from Frog and Toad Together by Arnold LaBelle. Frog was in his garden. Toad came walking by. "What a fine garden you have, Frog," he said. "Yes," said Frog, "it is very nice, but it is hard work." "I wish I had a garden," said Toad. "Here are some flower seeds. Plant them in the ground," said Frog, "and soon you will have a garden." "How soon?" asked Toad. "Quite soon," said Frog. Toad ran home. So I noticed that we have two characters that we can fill in on our story chart. So our characters are Frog and Toad. Now, our two characters are talking to each other, but they're not humans. They're a frog and a toad. Could this happen in real life? Could a frog and a toad talk to each other? No. Would a frog and a toad wear clothing like these two characters? No. This is a common theme in fantasy stories. Our characters can be animals, and they look and act like people would. He planted the flower seeds. "Now, seeds," said Toad, "start growing." Toad walked up and down a few times. The seeds did not start to grow. Now, the seeds haven't been growing right away. Could this happen in real life? When you plant seeds in the ground, do they sprout up into a plant right away? No, this is something that is real. It takes time for plants to grow. Toad put his head close to the ground and said loudly, "Now, seeds, start growing." Toad looked at the ground again. The seeds did not start to grow. Toad put his head very close to the ground and shouted, "Now, seeds, start growing." Frog came running up the path. "What is all this noise?" he asked. My seeds will not grow, said Toad. You are shouting too much, said Frog. These poor seeds are afraid to grow. My seeds are afraid to grow? Asked Toad. Now Frog said that the seeds would not grow because Toad was shouting at them. Could this really happen? No, frogs and toads can't talk or shout, and seeds can't hear. Now we have a problem in our story. So we have our two characters, Frog and Toad has a problem. What is the problem in our story? The seeds aren't growing. Of course, said Frog. Leave them alone for a few days. Let the sun shine on them. Let the rain fall on them. Soon your seeds will start to grow. So now Frog is saying to leave them alone and let the sun shine and the rain fall. Is this something that helps seeds grow in real life? Yes, these are the exact real-life things that seeds do need to grow. So now, when I look at this picture, I also see our setting. Our setting is where or when our story takes place. Where are they in the story? They're in the garden. Specifically, they're in Toad's garden. That night, Toad looked out his window. Drat, said Toad. My seeds have not started to grow. They must be afraid of the dark. Toad went out of his garden with some candles. I will read the seeds a story, said Toad. Then they will not be afraid. Toad read a long story to his seeds. So, do seeds need stories read to them, or can seeds be afraid in real life? No. And can real-life toads read stories? No. This is an example of our character acting like a human even though he's a toad, which is a feature of fantasy texts. All the next day, Toad sang songs to his seeds, and all the next day, Toad read poems to his seeds. And all the next day, Toad played music for his seeds. Could a real-life toad do these things? No. Toad looked at the ground. The seeds still did not start to grow. What shall I do? Cried Toad. These must be the most frightened seeds in the whole world. Then Toad felt very tired and he fell asleep. Could a real-life toad fall asleep when he's tired? Yes. He might not do it sitting up like that or with a violin next to them, but toads do fall asleep in real life. Toad, Toad, wake up, said Frog. Look at your garden. Toad looked at his garden. Little green plants were coming up out of the ground. In real life, do plants come out of the ground? They sure do. At last, shouted Toad, my seeds have stopped being afraid to grow. And now you will have a nice garden too, said Frog. Yes, said Toad, but you were right, Frog. It was very hard work. So now that we've finished our story, let's fill out our story map to help us remember what happened, because good readers have to remember what happened in the story. So who are our characters in the story? We had Frog and Toad. What about the setting? Remember, the setting is where our story takes place. And Frog and Toad might be in different places, but the setting is where they are for most of the story. So where were they? In Toad's garden. Now let's move to the problem. We have our two characters, Frog and Toad, and they're in the garden. What was the problem in our story? that the seeds would not grow. The next part is talking about the different events that take place in our story after our problem is presented. So what are some events that happen that Toad tries to solve the problem with? Do you remember what happens first? So first, Toad thinks that they're afraid, so he reads them stories at night. What next? A couple of things happen next. Toad sings to them, he reads them poetry and plays them music. Then what? He falls asleep. He's been working so hard and he's so sad that his seeds aren't growing. They must be the most frightened seeds ever. The last box is where our solution or outcome goes. So let's go back to our problem. Remember, our problem was that the seeds would not grow. So how did this problem get solved? We finally have plants sprouting from the ground. Do you think it was because he sang and read to them? No, just like Frog said at the beginning, he needed to give them time to let the sun and the rain do its work and help the seeds grow. And so finally the seeds are grown, and Toad is talking about how much hard work goes into planting and growing seeds. So now that we have finished our story, what you can do is you can draw your own story map and fill it in either with pictures like the one we have here or with words. So if I were to be writing words, let's go back up to our character box. You can draw a picture of Frog and Toad, or you can write the words or names of the characters. So I would write Frog and Toad in that box. Then in our setting, I would write the words Toad's garden, because that's where it took place. Then for the problem, I'm going to need more than just words. I'm going to need a small phrase or sentence to tell what the problem was. So you could write that Toad's seeds were not growing. Then the same would go for the last boxes as you fill out your story map. I'm going to jump down to the bottom though, and we're going to do an extra special activity at the end of our lesson today. So Toad talks about all the hard work that goes into planting a garden. For the last bit of our lesson, we're going to go outside and I'm going to show you my neighbor's garden and all the hard work that really does go into planting one. So I went over to my neighbor's garden. She has a great big backyard that she uses mainly for gardening vegetables, plants, fruit, herbs for her family to eat. So I went over to get a little video to show you. So this shows her starters. And what I mean by starters is this is where some of her plants start. She has little containers that she fills with soil and puts little seeds into. And then she puts them near a window for sunlight and waters them and takes care of them. So she has beets, watermelon, that's what she's pointing to now, spaghetti squash, cucumbers, zucchini, all of these yummy vegetables that she'll put in her garden. So, and as you can see, there's the zucchini and the seed is still stuck to the top of the seedling. Another thing that she does is she takes old rotted pumpkins from Halloween and she leaves them in the backyard to decompose, and then the dried up seeds are left over that she can plant in the ground to have more pumpkins grow. She did this with a sunflower too. So this is part of a sunflower with the dried up seeds, and she'll plant those seeds in the ground for more sunflowers. Any guesses what this is that she's planting? Pretty cute little flowers, huh? These are strawberries, and they don't look like strawberries yet because they just have blossoms on them. Do you remember in A Tree is a Plant how the tree had blossoms? Same goes for strawberries and a lot of fruits. They start as blossoms and then they turn into fruit. Here are some of her herbs. So this is mint, and she also has sage, rosemary, chives. And the best thing about having these planted in her garden is that when she's cooking, she doesn't need to run to the grocery store. She can just go into her backyard and grab some herbs or some vegetables, and she can use those to cook for her family. There's the big thing of rosemary. Rosemary likes to grow very large. And then I believe that might be basil. And then this is sage. So here's her backyard. Look at all of that room she has to plant her garden. That's pretty impressive. So this is where the starters will be planted when they're bigger. So there's another plant that's in her garden. See the little blossoms? This will be blueberries. She also has carrots, pumpkins, and raspberries in her garden. I did talk to my friend also about how much work she puts into her garden, and she puts a lot of work in to be able to plant all of those things for her family. She has to make sure that her plants are watered and they get plenty of sunlight and really rich soil. When you own a garden, you also have to make sure you protect it from animals like bunnies, like in Muncha, 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 but also bugs. So sometimes she lets ladybugs go in her garden because ladybugs are great to eat aphids, which are little tiny bugs that like to eat your plants. So I think Toad is right. It does take a lot of work to take care of a garden, but you have to make sure you're doing the right things to take care of those plants and keep them alive. I've enjoyed doing some literacy learning with you today. Thank you for joining me as you keep learning from home. I look forward to seeing you again for our next lesson.